First-time poster, long-time lurker. Obligatory apology for the formatting, as I am on mobile. I saw a post that reminded me of an experience I had that I had suppressed until being reminded. I was an athlete in college, so my athletic schedule was tricky to work around. Typically, I would have to go right from practice or conditioning work to class, so I would be dressed in practice uniform without time to change. I know, disgusting. Being part of the team also came with the requirement of carrying a team backpack that had your name on it to your classes. One of my required classes had an extension class that was held in the evening for those who couldn't attend the midday class. I was the only athlete in my academic program, so I was left to go to and from this class alone. The course was taught virtually, and the only way to hear the lecture was to be present in the class. There was no lecturer present, and by the time the class was done, campus was a ghost town, and it would be completely dark. My school is quite a bit older, so there isn't great lighting. Parking is limited, so it is easily a 5-minute walk from the classroom to the parking lot in the dark. There were 3 people total in this course. One of them was a sweet older lady that would be picked up by her husband right outside the building. The other was a man, probably in his late 30s. When I walked into the classroom for the first time, I could feel the creep coming off this guy before I even sat down. I sat as far away from him as possible. It was just my luck that the lecturer asked us all to sit together so we could all be seen on his screen at once. He ended up sitting right by me and saw my backpack with my sport and last name on it. He asked me about it in the middle of class. I gave him a brief reply and acted like I was too busy taking notes to talk to him. Not much else happened for the rest of the class, so I hurried back to my car and didn't think much of it. The next class, this guy came in after me. He intentionally sat right behind me and would whisper me a bunch of personal details that wouldn't be easily accessible, and showed me old newspaper articles from high school with my picture. He would whisper how cute I was and how I was the type of girl he usually pursues. I even felt him get right up next to my ear and smell my hair, and let out a sigh to show his satisfaction. The lady in class caught on to what was happening, and slid me a note while he wasn't looking, saying that she would take notes for me if I wanted to get an early start home. I gladly accepted. I told her I needed to use the bathroom and asked her if she could fill me in when I got back. I even left my notebook and pen in hopes that I wouldn't tip him off. I grabbed my bag and tried to walk out calmly. There were about 20 minutes left in the class, but it was already dark and campus was empty. I got my keys ready as I was walking away, so I didn't have to fumble around for them once I got to my car. I got maybe about 50 yards away from the building when I heard the old wooden door slam shut. My blood ran cold. I turned back, and I see this guy frantically searching for me. We lock eyes, and he starts running at me. I just as quickly turn and sprint towards my car, screaming as loudly as I can in hopes he'll stop. All I can hear is his feet pounding on the pavement behind me, seemingly getting closer. I didn't dare turn to check. I was certain he was going to catch me, and all at once, the running stopped. I don't know why. I just kept running until I got to my car and drove home as quickly as possible while continually checking that he wasn't following me. I got in my apartment and made my roommate stay up with me until I could calm down. I filed a report first thing the next morning and found out that this guy had several similar reports against him. I had a campus police officer escort me to and from class for the rest of the semester and didn't see the guy in class again. I did see him randomly here and there on campus though. I was always with someone, so he never approached me, but he would always hit me with a menacing, spine-chilling grin. I had a stalker in junior high and high school. This was back in the early 2000s, without being too specific. As far as I know, this guy is still out there somewhere. We met each other through an extracurricular activity group, and he struck me as a shy and quiet guy. I was rather shy myself. For the time being, we had only seen each other at these extracurricular get-togethers maybe once or twice a month. I don't remember when it happened or how, but we exchanged phone numbers, and he asked me to go to a dance with him at his high school since he was maybe 2 years older than me. Surprisingly, my mom agreed, and I was genuinely excited. The day rolled around and we arrived at the town where the boy lived. The dance happened and we danced together pretty much exclusively from what I remember, and maybe only once did we dance very close together. Maybe a couple months down the road, I had the opportunity to invite him to see a movie with my sisters and I, which he accepted and my parents agreed would be fine. All that happened at that time was we exchanged a few pleasantries before and after, but besides that, we only watched the movie, and I wouldn't even really consider that to have been a date. After a time, the boy started calling me almost every week, which was fun and nice at first, but he was exceedingly awkward despite how long we'd been communicating, and continued to be just as awkward to talk to no matter how many times we spoke. His voice was always very low and soft, and he spoke almost exclusively in short sentences, letting me do most of the talking. Honestly, there wasn't much going on in my life, so we ran out of things to talk about pretty quickly, but he often kept me on the phone for about an hour each time. It came to be that after a time I would get sick of talking to him. He didn't really contribute to the conversations, and I didn't have an interesting enough life to carry it on by myself. Before anyone gets mad at me for leading him on or whatever, I was a dumb teenager, raised to be nice and pleasing, and not to cut people off when it suited me. One day, I asked my mom if she could just call me to dinner or something when I felt like the conversation had petered out enough, and she agreed. That became my out for a long time. In addition to the phone calls, the guy also had my home address and email too. He would send me mostly funny chain letter type emails, and occasionally would write me a letter. The frequency of those was never enough to bother me, but the phone calls were really wearing me down. Later on, we moved to a different state during the summer, and the guy weaseled my new phone number and address out of me. I was kind of hoping that he'd have lost interest at this point, but that was not the case. The phone calls continued, and I continued having my mom shout me down to dinner or other random things after 15 to 30 minutes of awkward, mostly one-sided conversation. One afternoon, out of the blue, our doorbell rang, and I answered it, being the closest one to the door. To my surprise, the guy was there at the doorstep, along with a super tall male friend of his, whom I didn't know or recognize. I greeted the guys with a smile and asked them what they were doing there. I didn't think it was weird at first, but the longer this interaction went on, the stranger it became. For one thing, neither one said a word, and they both came towards me like they were going to push past me into the house. But once they noticed my parents were there, they kind of stopped and looked at each other, as if they didn't know what to do now. Me, not getting the gravity of the situation, invited them in and showed them the comic book I had been working on since the beginning of that summer. If the guy spoke at all, it was only very briefly, and his friend said nothing, nor was he introduced to me. Despite having driven supposedly from his hometown, which would have been more than 100 miles away, mind you, they only stayed for maybe 5 minutes, and then they both left. Only later did I fit the pieces together, and realized that the picture it made was dark and sinister. I decided after we moved to a different house that I wouldn't give him my forwarding address any longer, but he still had our home phone number since that hadn't really changed. Maybe a year or two after the surprise visit, I was home from school at our new house when the phone rang. I answered it, thinking it could be one of my friends from school, but it was the guy. I sighed, being unwilling to just tell him I didn't want to talk, and sat on the stairs with my chin in my hand, wishing my mom would come home so she could get me off the phone. After a while, the guy asked me what was wrong because I wasn't talking that much, and I kept yawning or sighing, so I said, "I'm just tired." "You don't look tired." My eyes darted to all the windows I could see from where I sat on the stairs. Could he see me? Where was he right now? How did he find our new house when I hadn't told him the address and we weren't listed in the phone book? I suddenly blurted out, "I have to go," and hung up the phone. I ran up the stairs, locked myself in the bathroom, and called my mom. I was terrified that the next thing I would hear was glass breaking and him coming to find me in the house. Mom told me not to move, and she would be home in a few minutes. I should have called the cops, honestly. The next time he called, only a few days later, mind you, and he acted like he hadn't been creepy at all just one phone call ago, I told him flat out that if he ever called me again, I would call the police. I'm still afraid of this guy. I don't know how he found me, and I'm a little afraid that he could find me again. I am no longer a huge pushover and state my boundaries whenever people push me, but I don't honestly know what I'd do if this were to happen again, nor do I know what he would do if he found me. I am from a small town, the kind where you're in the same class with the same kids from preschool through graduation. I was never popular and had my fair share of bullies, but never as bad as one kid in my class, Max. He was on the shorter side and had these little round glasses with his hair slicked to the side, like he was right out of a movie cast as the stereotypical nerd. He kept to himself and didn't really interact with others if he could avoid it. Fast forward to 8th grade, when we were paired as lab partners and had to sit at the same table together every day for the entire year. I considered myself a nice person, and always went out of my way to make sure I wasn't rude to people, especially people who hadn't done anything to deserve it. So, of course, I was friendly and happy to be his partner, as long as he did his fair share of the work. The year came and went. He was shy but polite, and we got along fine being partners. 9th grade started, and I had a lot of troubles at home with my birth father, so I chose to move in with my mother a few towns over. I was only about 30 minutes away, but I had to start a completely new school a month into my freshman year, and it was scary. I may not have been popular at my last school, but I did have several friends whom I loved and missed dearly. My mom would often drive me to the other town to see my friends and hang out, and I also started making new friends at my new school. It was a good setup, and I continued this way until I was 16 and could drive myself. I never heard anything from Max, and honestly, I had kind of forgotten about him. That was until my junior year of high school. I started casually seeing this other guy, Jack, from my hometown, and he asked me to go with him to prom. I was excited and happy to say yes, as I would get to spend the night with him and my friends from childhood. A couple of months before prom, my mother told me that there was a new lady at her job, and she was asking about me because her grandson was seeing me, and she wanted a picture so that she could put a face to my name. My mother knew Jack and knew this wasn't his grandmother, so she asked his name, and wouldn't you know it, it was Max. My mother showed her a picture of me that she had on her desk, and the lady went on her way. A few weeks later, she asked for the color of my prom dress so that she knew what to get Max so that we matched. My mother was confused, but told her it was pink. About 2 weeks before prom, some of my friends from my hometown told me that Max had been telling some people that we were going to the dance together, and that he was so excited. I thought this was creepy, but I didn't put too much thought into it. The night of prom, I picked Jack up, and we headed over to the school, only to find Max and his grandmother waiting outside the entrance so that she could take pictures of us before we go in. I was not one to disappoint people, so I politely took a couple of pictures with him as my actual date stood off to the side and waited. If Max's grandmother was confused that I had another date, she didn't show it. The rest of the night went by smoothly, and Jack and I had a great time. We didn't see Max anymore and assumed he had left. Other than his grandmother telling my mom that he lost my number and was trying to get it for him, which she thankfully didn't do, I didn't hear much from him until we graduated. I went to a state college, and I had heard that he had gotten into a well-respected private university. Everything was fine for the first few weeks of college, and then I ran into him. He caught me on the way to class one day. I was polite and asked him if he was a student here too, which he was, and I chatted with him for a minute before hurrying off to class. It was a relatively harmless interaction, but it still creeped me out a bit since I knew he got into that other school and wondered why he chose to go to a state college. For the next few months, I ran into him almost daily. He always wanted to talk and never seemed to be with anyone else. I found out from some girls in my dorm that he had been hanging around asking about me and trying to figure out my class schedule and where I would be and when. He also told them that he was my boyfriend, and he passed up a scholarship to another college to come here and be with me instead. They figured out he was lying when they never saw us together for long periods of time, or him up in the rooms with me, and stopped answering his questions. I left at the end of the semester to move home and take classes at a nearby school. I didn't tell him that, obviously. The following year, I got married to my boyfriend for my senior year of high school. Stupid, I know. Anyway, we were in his small town, which is in the same county as my hometown, for a fair shortly after the wedding. While walking around and enjoying ourselves, I see Max staring at us at the end of the block. It was the first time I had been genuinely fearful of him, as the look on his face was nothing short of hatred. I tried to ignore him and went about my night, seeing him a few more times, always with that look on his face. The next few years passed, with me hearing nothing from him at all. I didn't even know if he still lived in the area or not. I found out a little while later that he did, when I started working at a clothing store in town, and he would stop in and sit in that dad chair next to the door for all the guys to hang out in while their people shopped. I mentioned it to my manager because of our history and the fact that he would stare at me constantly while sitting there, but he always came in with a girl. I later found out that she was his sister, so they didn't think too much of it. He never spoke to me, just stared. When I was in my mid-20s, I moved to a city in my home state, but still several hours away from my small town. I am 30 now and doing well in life. Other than a random Facebook friend request, which I rejected, I haven't heard from him. I hope that it stays that way. What's up, everybody? This is the Lone Wolf here. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed these 3 Stalker stories. So, I have a few acknowledgements in this video. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Redditors who allowed me to read their stories in this video. There will of course be links to their posts in the description below for those of you who want to read them. Second, I would like to thank CO.AG Music for letting me use some of his work in this video. He is one of my favorite horror music artists, and I am so happy that I got to use some of his work. There will be a link to his channel in the description, alongside the other music artists and individual tracks that I used, for those of you interested in the music. And last but certainly not least, I want to give a very, very special thanks to DodgeThis82 for helping me with my new intro. I hope you guys like my new intro. Please feel free to let me know what you think of it in the comments. She also helped me out with my audio and made it sound a little bit more clean, so I just want to say thank you so much, DodgeThis82, for all of your help. I really, really appreciate it. There will also be a link to her channel in the description for those of you who want to subscribe to her. Anyways, if you're new to my channel, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing if you like the narrations. Hit the bell for notifications and join the Lone Wolf Pack. If any of you have any ideas or tips for me to make my channel even better, please leave me a comment or send me a personal message. There will be a link to my email account and my Twitter account in the description. Until next time, stay spooky. And remember, the hunt begins when the moon is full. Sleep tight.